Module 4, Chapter 4, Presentation. I chose corporal punishment because, for me, I came from Tennessee, where corporal punishment is legal, exercised pretty regularly, especially when I was a kid. I got paddled every day in third grade. It was ridiculous. Anyway, we all know, also known as beating, spanking, whipping, uh, and today people call it child abuse, and a lot of times it is. So, corporal punishment, what is it? It is physical contact for disciplinary purposes. And, this is a good example. Some people, I remember when I was in preschool, the teacher used to hit us on the palm of the hand. It is legal in the United States and not uncommon. Our book says there's 23 states. That's kind of out of date. 4 more states have come forward, and I believe there's 19 states where corporal punishment is legal. Most of them are in the South, Texas, Kansas, unless a new development came about where Fort Hays State there is, Kansas and Idaho. Most states south of the Mason-Dixon line still have corporal punishment being legal. Alabama actually has a state law protecting teachers who use it. I haven't looked into that law so much to see what it protects, but they have enacted a law that protects teachers. Is corporal punishment constitutional? Well, in the 70s, a Supreme Court case called Ingram versus Wright did deem corporal punishment legal. Student was given 20 licks for disobeying a teacher, and they took it to court. And under the Eighth Amendment, they tried to battle this under the Eighth Amendment of cruel and unusual punishment. The judge decided that cruel and unusual punishment, or the Eighth Amendment, did not pertain to school children. It was mostly towards prisoners. But from this case, they got a few things. There must be a witness present, and the parents' wishes should be considered or respected. And that's where a lot of people go today. Parents will write notes. They will elect not to have their kid punished in lieu of some other consequence. Also, probably because of this case, many local districts have severely limited corporal punishment. In Tennessee, my first job was working at a very small school, 500 kids, preschool through 12th grade, all in one building. Corporal punishment was still used, but very rarely. And the principal was usually the one who used it. He actually discouraged female teachers from using it, being scared that maybe a male student bigger than her might turn on her. And he did it also for legal reasons. He told me when I first started, if you choose to paddle a kid, that's up to you, but make sure you have a witness, and if you have any questions, he said bring them to me and let him do it for those reasons. He wanted to make sure his teachers didn't get in trouble legally. So, reasonable punishment. If you're going to do it, it needs to be reasonable. Even though it's legal doesn't mean you get the right just to smack kids around. But reasonable can be subjective, and the reason it needs to be reasonable is because some cases have gone to court for things like hitting students with belts. You hear about that at home, people whipping their kids with the belt. It happened at a school sometime. Next thing, a lacrosse stick. I'm going to go ahead and guess this was a PE teacher or coach who had a lacrosse stick readily available, but that's a little excessive. Next, a baseball bat. Surprised me the most. I really wouldn't think anybody would use a baseball bat on a student. An electrical cord, you had to search pretty hard to get an electrical cord. It's not reasonable. Bamboo stick, I've seen this one in Korea where corporal punishment is still heavily used, even though in Seoul City it is considered illegal. But I've seen people use bamboo, and bamboo is hard. A hose. Really, a teacher just had a hose laying around to smack a kid with. I really don't think that's reasonable. These, kicked. I've personally witnessed a student here in Korea be kicked by a teacher. Hard to believe that's reasonable. Choked. I haven't seen a kid choked, but I've seen him almost choked. It's hard to explain how that works, but a student was actually choked for punishment. Not reasonable at all. And then the biggest one, eating cigarettes. Forced to eat a cigarette. not reasonable. Not reasonable. These things are unreasonable and they cannot be defended against in a court of law. There's no way a teacher is going to get by from doing those things. And anything that is unreasonable, it's not going to happen. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to get sued. You're probably going to lose your job and never teach again. Reasonableness and good faith standards. The first one, punishment must be reasonable and humane. We know reasonable and humane can be subjective. Each person has their own idea. One person's reasonable, maybe somebody else's over the top. And then we come in with good faith, where the person punishing should be free of malice. No reason. You're not going to get reasonable punishment when you're angry. The teacher has to be calm if they're going to do it. They really can't have malice in their heart and intent to hurt a child. It should never ever happen. And then the punishment shouldn't be excessive. Those things we mentioned before, the past allegations, completely excessive. The student should be allowed minimal due process. The student should be informed of the rule violation and given themselves briefly a chance to describe why they did what they did. That might help teachers back off and say, does this kid need corporal punishment? If you kind of understand the kid, that would be, due process. Hear their side of the story. Understand what happened. The kid may not have known what happened. They may not understand. They may be innocent of the rule. And teachers should be able to give parents a written explanation of the reasons for the punishment. And this would be where the brief conference with the student would happen. And, of course, the witness that should have been at the corporal punishment, the parents need to know who that is, so of course they can talk to them to see what they saw. Excessive punishment. Those things we mentioned earlier, the belt, the bamboo, all those things were completely excessive. If you're going to do corporal punishment, you better make sure it's not excessive or you're going to be charged with assault and battery. It's happened numerous times all over the United States, even in states where it is legal for corporal punishment. Teachers have been charged with assault and battery. So that's a big deal. Also, this is a big thing. Take into account the age, the size, the gender, and the physical condition of a student, or their ability to bear punishment. In the third grade, my teacher was a really small lady, and I'm a big guy. Right now, at 34 years old, I'm 6'4", 310 pounds. I've never been small in my life. I was bigger than her in the third grade, and she used to lay into me. But that's reversed. When my first year of teaching in Tennessee, corporal punishment was the norm. I did paddle some students, but I always took into account that these kids are way small and I'm way big. You have to be careful with how you do it. My teacher felt I could bear some of the harder licks, so she gave them to me. And that also goes, you can't be a male PE teacher or a male who's in really good shape and whip a fifth grader so hard that you knock them forward when you paddle them. That would be deemed excessive. A handicapped student. I don't think that's reasonable to paddle a handicapped student whose body cannot bear the punishment. And also, if a kid resists you physically, there's no way you should continue on. You're causing all kinds of other problems. Students always like to jump forward, that type of stuff. I've seen it when I was a student. The teacher hits them on the hands, they break a finger, all kinds of things go on. Excessive punishment will get you in trouble. The book gives some good guide towards using corporal punishment if you choose. Acts that are so antisocial or disruptive that it shocks the conscience. That's a pretty big deal to shock your conscience. That's when our textbook says that this corporal punishment could be used. Another one that stands out is students should be allowed punishment options when possible. They really an alternate option would be good for you to give to a student instead of spanking them or whipping them. That's a good thing. and attempts to honor the parent's request for no corporal punishment. However, I really like this a lot. If a state has legal corporal punishment and that school district uses it and that school uses it, and a parent opts out, then they should definitely be made to understand that if their child disrupts the school day so much that it would warrant corporal punishment, that the parent is responsible for that child's behavior. Maybe instead of corporal punishment, that school district calls the parents and lets them know that, hey, your child has misbehaved so bad that you're going to have to come get them. They can't stay at school anymore that day. A conclusion, corporal punishment is legal in many states, although it's frowned upon in our society today. Does the punishment fit the crime? Are you, as the punisher, being reasonable with your punishment? That would be a big deal if you choose to use it. Was the student afforded due process? Did you allow them due process? Was an alternative punishment offered? That would be a good thing. After you go through due process and hear a student's side of the story, did you offer them another a means of punishment? And was corporal punishment used as a last resort? That's when you're going to use it, if you use it at all. So now I'm just going to tie my standards in. I felt like standard 4.3 and 4.4, where you're building positive relationships with families in your communities. I don't think as an administrator you could allow corporal punishment to build positive relationships. And this is where my school district comes in. Of course, DODEA outlaws or bans corporal punishment. We don't use it. And I have seen some excellent teachers here have ways of dealing with students without corporal punishment. And I also think standard 5.4 is consider and evaluate the potential moral and legal consequences of decision making. You're always having to consider the moral. Is it morally right to spank a student? And next, you have to consider the legal consequences. Are you putting your school and your school district in danger by issuing corporal punishment? Are you ready to take on that lawsuit? Are you ready to lose that lawsuit and cost your district money? Those standards are what go in, and like I said, it's the norm in the South where I'm from when I was a kid, so that's all I knew. And as a teacher, I felt like corporal punishment was an okay thing. I moved to Korea in 2008 and witnessed their corporal punishment, which was way over the top, excessive. Seen some interesting things. Seen students kicked, seen them hit, all kinds of weird calisthenics they're required to do. And then I moved to my current job, and I saw that you can manage your classroom without corporal punishment. So from my current job, that's where I'm tying this in. I think that now I have changed my attitude about corporal punishment and what you're capable to do as a teacher and what you're able to do as a teacher without corporal punishment. You're able to manage and get students' respect. I think you would lose your community's respect with corporal punishment. So that's my presentation.